All right, welcome to Before Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network, our YouTube channel. Of course, this is an extension of the very popular Five on the Floor podcast, and you can catch Floor's Yours after games. Alphonse Sidney will be hosting that one. Got 7,500 views for the last one, so I have to top it, or else I got to give him a bunch of beer and some Manscaped product and play some bets for him at my bookie and everything else related to our sponsors. Get his wheels done at You Break Wheel Fix. So we got to get the views up for this one so it doesn't cost me so much. Today's episode is sponsored by Biscayne Bay Brew. I'm going to pop this open here at some point. This is the Pale Ale. Of course, this is the official beer, the official local beer, but the official beer of Inter Miami, also the Miami Marlins, and us, Five Reasons Sports Network. Still got some cases here, guys, so we'll try to distribute them. Greg's going to have to come down from South Carolina. Brady's not old enough to drink yet, so that's not going to work. But maybe I'll sneak you some too. All right, let's get right to it. We're going to cover everything here we can in 15 minutes. First thing today, the big news: Eric Bledsoe is playing, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic. Shams just re-signed a new deal. He is playing, so he will be starting for the Milwaukee Bucks today. So no more excuses that they don't have their starting point guard. They're healthy. They're ready to go. The other news was reported by our Greg Sylvander, who is here with me. By the way, the crew, if you're not familiar, Alejandro Villegas, our producer, right over there. Brady Hawk on the other side of me, Alfredo Arteaga, who has a podcast. You got to do a 3 yards per carry podcast tonight.
Yes, in about 45 minutes.
All right, he's beneath, and then also Greg Sylvander. Alpha, as I mentioned, will be on later, as will Alex. One of the things that Greg reported today is that Dan Craig is being strongly considered for the Chicago Bulls coaching job. This is not the first person who's been courted somewhere else. Of course, Adam Simon got a bunch of looks, including in Chicago, for an executive position. Dan Craig is one of those. He's been groomed with the Heat. He is Eric Spoelstra's closest friend inside the organization. He's the guy he sits next to on the plane when, of course, there were planes. And Dan, it's pretty obvious Dan was going to get looked at in some other places. I wouldn't sweat it too much right now, but we'll see how that plays out. And, of course, if Dan does leave, and Dan's only going to leave for the right situation, especially with what happened with Fizz in New York.
Exactly.
But if Dan does leave, Fizz is available. He's still making money from the Knicks, and he could come back and work the bench if he had to. So I'm sure Eric would probably make that phone call. So I wouldn't sweat that too much. All right, let's get to – probably that phone call's already probably been made. Let's get to tonight's game. Heat up 1-0 in this series. Brady, I'm going to start with you today because you had a tweet that got a little bit of attention. Follow Brady at Brady Hawk 305 about what has become the storyline. You know, between playoff games, there's always a storyline, but typically there's a lot of media around the players and newspaper columns and everything. This is different, right? Because it's in the bubble. But still, the storyline between Game 1 and Game 2, and it got played up more because Sam Amick of The Athletic had to sit down in the bubble with Jimmy Butler that got attention today, was Giannis not guarding Jimmy, and also just generally the way that the Bucks played in that first game, which allowed Jimmy to get off. But I thought you had the right tweet today. How do you think this plays out in terms of guarding Jimmy?
I just think people have been looking at the way Butler played in Game 1 instead of looking at how he played all season. You know, he had that 40-point game, which I think he can do, obviously, if everybody else wasn't hitting shots like they weren't. But like he said in that interview you mentioned with Sam Amick, there's way more guys on this team that are capable of doing that than Jimmy is, and that's what they go to. So if guys like Duncan, if guys like Tyler, Goran, even guys like Kelly Olynyk and Jay Crowder, if they're hitting, they're going to go to them more often than not. And if Giannis is going to, and the whole team is going to start focusing on Jimmy, I think that's what he wants. I think more importantly, he's a playmaker, and he's very comfortable with that side of his game, that he's going to try and do what he's done all season, which is get his shooters open.
I want to flip this, Greg, a little bit because I feel like everybody's missing the point. If we're going to be talking about why Giannis was not guarding Jimmy, then we're basically saying that the job that Chris Middleton is on this team to do, which is to be their second best player and to take those tough defensive assignments from Giannis, Chris Middleton is not capable of doing. If you're saying it has to be Giannis, it's kind of like the Kawhi conversation, you know, where I threw out there yesterday. Okay, in the next series, is Kawhi going to guard Murray? And everybody's like, well, playoff P or pandemic P, whatever you want to call him, is going to do that. Paul George right? But I'm like, okay, is he? Because he has not played very well in the postseason. If your second best guy can't take those defensive assignments, okay, in the same way that the Heat's second best defenders, okay, on the perimeter, whether it's Iguodala or maybe Iggy's the best defender, Iguodala or Crowder are taking it for the Heat, you're not going anywhere. And that gets back to this premise we had before the series, which is that Giannis may decide he does not have enough help in his number 2 guy in Milwaukee to actually stay there.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a little early. I have a feeling that the media, the mainstream media, and also the NBA community is probably pushing for adjustments quicker than Bud will. I mean, we've already heard from a variety of Milwaukee folks that Coach Bud doesn't make adjustments on the fly. I don't necessarily think they're going to deviate from what we saw in game 1. There may be some subtle differences, and if Jimmy gets off, then they make a change. But ultimately, I think they're going to start out similar to what they did in game 1 and see where they can get. But you're onto something. If Jimmy keeps cooking Middleton game after game, that's just going to magnify this whole conversation we've been having, and you're not going to be able to run from it at that point.
Yeah, I mean, look, for everything that Chris Middleton does offensively, the point is he's a two-way all-star. I mean, he's one of the better 3-and-D, wings in the league, and he does other things. He has to take the defensive assignment with Jimmy Butler. If he does not, the Heat are going to win this series. But Alfredo, let's go to it, though, because, we talk about Bud not making adjustments, but Bud made an adjustment prior to game 1. I mean, the whole season was you're not getting in the paint, right? You have as many threes as you want. And in game 1, all the Heat did was get to the paint. Like Dragic
outscored him by 22 in the paint. Yeah.
Right. So didn't Bud already make an adjustment that doesn't work? I mean, isn't the idea to now go back to what they did to be one of the best defensive teams in history during the regular season?
Yeah, it's obvious that that's what they have to do. But the trap that they could fall into is to try to go a 180 with what they did in the first game, and that might allow the Heat to get to their best game, which is kicking and driving and getting up 35 three-point shots. If the Heat do that, I really do feel as if the Milwaukee Bucks can't handle the Heat's best game. What we've yet to see is both teams at their best and who is better. But if the Heat win this one, I feel very comfortable in saying that this series is essentially over. Normally, if this is a regular year, any other year, they're playing game 2 in Milwaukee, you have no idea how much money I would bet on the Bucks, and I'd probably be borrowing money to put on the Bucks tonight, money line. But it's not like that anymore. Okay, it's the bubble. It's a neutral court. The Heat win tonight. It's a wrap.
I kind of agree with you to an extent, although I don't think Giannis will allow it. I mean, they're not the Sixers. I do think that they're going to fight through on this series, but I think the other point you make that is a good point is when you have a number 1 seed that is so dominant during the regular season, you would assume that if they play their best game and a 5 seed plays their best game, that the 1 seed is going to win. Yeah. But in this particular matchup, I actually don't think that's the case. If Miami gets to its game, which I just saw Ben put up a comment, which I agree with. It's almost like Jimmy set the trap in game 1. I mean, Jimmy, the way I was told about the way Jimmy prepares for playoff series is it's not about one game. He prepares for the series as a whole and then makes adjustments. I kind of think after rewatching those last 8 minutes that Jimmy decided I'm going to make them concentrate on me early. And then the floodgates are going to open for everybody else. And he kind of said it today to Sam Amick. So, I almost feel like, as Ben said, I think he's kind of set the trap for them. And if Miami has its best game, which is 45% from 3 on 40 attempts, the Bucks are not beating them.
No.
Yeah. I mean,
I think you're overreacting. He Twitter always does this. Every time they lose, they're like, "Oh my God, we're gonna get swept." Every time they win, now we're gonna sweep in the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't think. I mean, they can win tonight. That's fine, and they can go 2-0. It's still they're playing in the same spot. It's not like they're gonna have the home court advantage and they're going home with the 2-0 advantage. So no, it's just a series, 7 games in the same place, and I still think it's gonna go for a long series. Regardless of what happens tonight, because I think the Milwaukee Bucks are going to make some type of adjustment. It's going to be hard for the Heat, and it's going to be a battle that it's going to go for very long. So hopefully they sweep. That would be awesome for us, but I just think that's just not realistic at this point.
Well, we just saw a Utah team get up 3-1 on Denver with no change of venue, no change of scenery. The only change to that series was Gary Harris played, and that gave them, he was bad offensively, but it gave them an actual backcourt defender, which made Donovan Mitchell at least work at times. And they came back and won the last 3, and so it can happen. But I do. So I'm not with you, Alfredo. I don't think it's over if it goes to 2-0.
No, you just said you were with him.
No, I'm with him. I'm telling you what I'm with him about. I'm with him about that if each of them plays their best game. I think that's what I've come to, is that Miami's best game is better than Milwaukee's best game. And Eric kind of hinted this yesterday. He said, you don't reinvent the wheel. You just do what you do more consistently and better. Eric knows he has the kind of team that if it gets to its game, will be able to beat this team, matches up well with this team. And it's just getting to that game. Great.
That's what that. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Go, Greg.
I was just gonna say that, like, you hit the nail on the head with this. Jimmy is kind of coaxing them into one mind frame, and it's kind of the trap, because ultimately that's not how the Heat want to play. Jimmy getting 40 is not the recipe. So ultimately, if Duncan Robinson gets 6 threes and you got those guys unlocked, it kind of then they're scurrying that much more to figure out solutions. So I think it's an interesting game that if Milwaukee loses, the series isn't over, but it'll be pretty telling if they drop 2 in a row.
I think it comes down to whose star players play better, not score more, but play better. Because I realized that in that game 1, Butler and Bam as a duo were the best plus minus was a +9 for the Heat. And for the Bucks, the worst duo for them was Giannis and Middleton on the court out of any team. So I think it just comes down to which duo plays, kind of which star duo, trio, whatever, plays the best at the end of the day. We're going to have like the role players that obviously Miami has step up that gives them the biggest jump offensively. But I think it comes down to who does makes the small plays, as both Bam and Butler always do.
Alejandro's getting some love on the comments. I'm not gonna get into that.
Say hi to her.
The other thing about it though is I was looking at some of the rotations that Eric used, and we talked a lot about Kendrick Nunn as the 9th, and clearly that's going to continue, and playing the 3 guards together. But the other thing he did not do in game 1, unless I'm mistaken, was take Bam and Jimmy off the floor together, right? Was there ever a time where there were no Bam, no Jimmy minutes? Because I don't remember them.
No, I don't.
Neither do I.
No. And that happened a lot in the Indiana series. There's a tongue twister. So you're onto something there. Is that, like, as these stakes grow higher, I don't know if foul trouble isn't an issue. Why would you take both of them off the floor?
But some of it may have to do with Nunn entering the lineup over Derek Jones, because I feel that was like a rotational thing that Bam would come off the floor for him. So I think now with Nunn coming in, it just kind of rotates Goran a little bit more, which is perfect for what they need. Even though they played the 3 guard thing, I think they need to sit Goran a little bit just for his age. That they're trying to save him just a tad for being 34 years old.
I mean, one thing that was interesting from game 1 in the second half, they started denying Brook Lopez the ball. Yeah. I'm wondering if that was an in-game adjustment, or is that a thing going forward in this series?
Well, it was something Orlando did a lot, and I feel like that was in Eric's back pocket. I do think we'll see it more. People asked, are they going to start Jay on Giannis? I would assume so. If that matchup, was somewhat effective in game 1, I mean, you're not as concerned about Jay's fouls. That's the biggest thing. You want Jay on the floor, but if Jay picks up 4 or 5 fouls, you play Iggy Moore. You play Derek Jones Jr. I think might get some of those minutes if he gets in foul trouble. So I think the idea with Jay is just, it's one of the things Eric always said. When he's got deep rotations, is just go play your minutes hard. That's it. It's what he used to tell Dwayne when Dwayne came back. It's just play your minutes hard. We'll worry about it later. But Brady makes a good point about Goran. We're getting to a point here. He's getting 34 to 36 minutes.
That's true.
Okay. I know it's every other day. He said he kind of, I get along very well with Goran, but he kind of snapped at me yesterday when I asked him something related to this, and he said, this isn't my first rodeo.
Yeah, he told you that.
He did tell me that, and then he kind of backed off.
It's here in the YouTube channel. You guys can watch it.
Yeah, it's right there. You're checking all the videos are there. The Nunn video, the Crowder video, the Jimmy video, the Bam video from the last game. But he basically, he said, yes, I'm playing better than I ever have in the playoffs. I mean, every other day he told his family to stay in Europe. No wonder Jimmy loves him. No family, nothing around there. But I don't know, man. I mean, 34-year-old point guard playing. Would we be concerned about Dwayne doing this at age 34? Because I think we would be.
I don't know. The way I look at it is the season is not months old and 89 games old. I think the season is 13 games old.
They had a huge break.
Yeah,
so this is a new season. I think he's fresh. Like I wouldn't hear any like dead leg complaints. Like,
well, no, because
who can have dead legs?
They swept Indy, which was huge. Like, I think that this is another important thing. The smaller series, let's do Heat in 5 versus Milwaukee so he can rest even more for Boston. No, but ultimately, if they get those little pockets of rest and then they play back to back to back as well as he's playing, he may actually embrace that where he gets to continually get back on the court because he's playing so well. It's like a momentum thing.
And you mentioned the Indiana matchup. I think obviously Brogdon played really good, but he didn't have to chase around like a Kemba Walker or any of these quick guards that could also mess with him. I think Brogdon being a more just methodical kind of player that would just benefit him more as a kind of defensive aspect.
I think you're right in terms of that, and that is why the Bledsoe, and we'll close here, that is why the Bledsoe edition matters today, because even Kendrick Nunn said yesterday they play faster with Bledsoe. Goran knows Bledsoe well. Things didn't go so well for them together in Phoenix when some reason the Suns decided they were going to start Isaiah Thomas, Eric Bledsoe, and Goran Dragic in their starting lineup and see how the 3-guard thing went. And Goran's like, I'm not playing small forward. Thank you very much. And that was one of the reasons he wanted to be traded. But I do think Bledsoe changes the dynamic in part because it puts George Hill back on the bench. And I think that they need a stabilizing force on that bench. You have DiVincenzo. But he gives them a different element on the
He
bench.
pushes pace. Like, they need another player to push pace. They don't want to get in those half-court battles. Like, they get like hot potato. So they need the pace that Bledsoe brings. So that's something to watch tonight, too.
You mentioned it, Greg, in the starting lineup up. You throw it up one more time. It is the starting lineup we expected. So Goran, Duncan, Jimmy, J, and Bam. You mentioned it, too. For a team that was so good in the regular season, it's almost like they weren't tested enough in the regular season.
You're right.
To play close games. They looked scared late. Like they looked like they didn't know where the ball was supposed to go. And remember, even though the Heat struggled at times later on in the pre-COVID season down the stretch, they also were 8-1 in overtime or something like that. They played a lot of those games. I'd have to look, but I doubt
a lot of them against bad teams too.
Right. Well, yeah, some of them. They had to come back from They go 22-0 on Atlanta when Trae Young, called them out. But I very much doubt that the Bucks played that many close games during the season. I feel like they buried people.
I think some of that has to do with their role players. I kind of noticed in game one, it was kind of Giannis, Chris Middleton, and then obviously Brook Lopez, but nobody else really stepped up for them offensively. I think that's why Bledsoe is going to be a big part for them, especially with the Goran matchup. He's going to be able to attack the rim like he usually does, and I think that's going to be a big part for them. And like you mentioned, obviously George Hill going to the bench is going to help them out with that bench unit. I just think with if they have at least another scorer on the court for them, that's going to be a big push for them. I think.
Well, Brady, they don't have a lot of guys who create for an elite team. They really don't. I mean, they have Giannis, they have Middleton, they have Bledsoe. Everybody else is dependent on what is created for them. It's a little bit like the LeBron, Dwayne team, Bosh teams, where it was like, okay, we have some other guys, but they're not going to do it themselves. James Jones or any of those guys, or even Rio to a certain degree. It had to be created for them. The question is either does Goran go under screens versus Bledsoe? I would assume yes, actually. I think you got to make Eric Bledsoe a shooter.
It also depends on who the screener is, but yeah.
Right. Exactly. And this comment comes Jimmy gave up sex to help us win a championship.
One thing you can't do with Bledsoe is you especially against this team, you don't want to trap him. And you don't want to trap him high because if he gets the ball out and they start swinging it to the weak side and Giannis gets it, it's pretty much a wrap for the possession. So Eric Bledsoe's a guy that's kind of important because for them because we're going to sink or swim with whoever we put in front of him.
It's also on the other end, though. Eric Bledsoe is still very much a plus defender, and he's a physical defender. And I would expect Warren would have more trouble than against George Hill. I like George Hill, but he's not the same physical presence that Bledsoe is.
Kendrick Nunn, on the other hand, I think that some of the things Bledsoe does with the aggressive defense, the ball hawking, Kendrick Nunn actually reacts to that in a strong way because he makes decisive moves to get to the basket. So that's something else. I think this could be a Nunn game.
It could be a Nunn game, and Eric has hinted at that. There's something about this matchup he likes with Kendrick Nunn, and it's not just because a couple of his better games came earlier in the season when Kendrick was rolling. He definitely, if you're playing three guards together, you're going that small against this team, you're forcing a guy into the lineup is what you're doing. I mean, they could easily have set DJJ or even Myers for a few minutes against Brook Lopez, but they've made a decision. We're going to go small. All right, after the game, post-game pod, I'm hosting. Greg will be with me. Also, we're going to have a post-game stream here. Alf probably loaded up on a few of these. Biscayne Bay Brew. If you want to find these, go to BiscayneBrew.com, and they have a beer finder on there to see if it's in your Publix. So you've got this. You've got, obviously, the Marlins lager as well and the IPA. So check those out. Also, if you want to bet on this, you got a few minutes. MyBookie.ag, MyBookie.ag, and the code is 5 on the floor, and they will double your initial deposit. Okay? Or what's the other code? 3 yards, right? If you want to say
3 yards. The word 3 yards.
We're beating you. 5 on the floor. 5 on the floor. All right? All right. We'll talk to you after the game.